All right, let's get rolling. Welcome, everybody. There you go. Thank you, Bill Kaplan, for starting the applause. Appreciate it. It's funny, I think every year this feels like one of two things. The first is a little bit of a reunion. The knowledge management community is a tight one. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces, but the second thing that I hope this feels like over the next couple days is an exploration. As the community continues to grow, as we have new folks here, as we see that more and more jobs have knowledge management in the title. More and more procurements are coming out with the letters K and M somewhere in them. This is a field that is growing. Make no mistake about it. Sometimes it's not necessarily called knowledge management, but we know what it is. So as I'm going to be sharing with you, we're on the precipice of the next phase of growth and expansion in the industry, and I'm excited to share that with you over the next couple days. What I want to do over the next hour is really twofold. One, give you a little bit of a view of the conference. We've had a couple last-minute changes due to the dreaded coronavirus. We'll share that with you. And we'll also kind of give you a view of what we expect over the next couple days in the two tracks. The second thing is to begin talking about what we see as knowledge management in 2020 and beyond. The themes that we're seeing both within enterprise knowledge, but also within the industry as a whole. And my hope there is that over the next couple days, you will add and challenge the themes that I'm talking about. Hopefully, you're seeing your own. Maybe you'll reinforce what I'm going to present up here. Perhaps, on the contrary, you'll disagree with it, and we'll get an opportunity to talk about that as well. But I, at least, am going to be writing a blog following up on this conference about those 2020 trends, and I would love your inputs and love your thoughts to help me see what I might have missed or what I might have gotten wrong. For now, that handsome devil is me. I'm Zack Wall. I'm the CEO of Enterprise Knowledge. I'm also chairing this conference. I've been doing KM in one fashion or another for over 20 years. I got into it back in the 90s in a time where the internet was just starting. I remember one of my professors in college turned to me my senior year and said, "Zach, have you browsed the World Wide Web yet?" And my response was, "No, professor, what is that mystical World Wide Web?" And that was really the beginning of it. I got really interested in this and found myself with a job in web design without knowing how to write a line of code. So I had to figure out what was my role to play. And my role to play was connecting IT and users, bridging the gap between technology and business value. And at its core, I can't think of a better definition for what good KM does. So that's how my career began, and I've been loving it ever since. And over the next couple days, I hope we get to hear more of those stories from our speakers and participants about how they got into this field. For now, thank you for being here. One of the things that we want to do as good KMers is make sure that we're sharing our knowledge. And we'll do that in person, face-to-face, over the next couple days by sitting at lunch with somebody you don't know or striking up a conversation over a cup of coffee. But we also hope that you'll do this online. We'll use the hashtags KMShow or KM2020. If you hear something cool, or if you want to challenge something, make sure to put out a tweet about it. Take pictures of the slides. KMI will make all of the slides available for download after, and as you can see from the video cameras, we're also recording the presentation, so don't feel that you need to take every bit of notes, but do help us share this online so that those who couldn't be here can also benefit from it. A word on the current health concerns. Here's my guidance. Transfer knowledge, not germs, number one. Number two, slightly more serious. Don't assume people want to shake your hand or hug. I know that is the general greeting or two, but some people are pretty worried about this, so ask before you shake. And then last but not least, I don't know if we've got any people that like spicy food in the room, but this will be something that everybody can appreciate. Wash those hands, and we'll be just fine over the next couple days. So, onto a view of the agenda. And this is something that I know that's small print, but you all have this on page 3 of your booklets. Just some high points to really guide you on this. First, we've got track 1. Both days, track 1 is going to be, once we divide the partition after this talk, is going to be over yonder. It's going to be to your left. And track 1 is what we've really pulled together is knowledge management experts, folks that have been doing this like me for their entire career, folks that have been in the trenches. Now, we've been really careful here. These are not folks that are good at talking about KM, but not good at doing KM. We have been very purposeful in selecting speakers that have proven success stories to share, that aren't the talking heads, but have actually pulled this stuff off. And all of them have been encouraged to share their successes, but also share their failures. And I think as KMers, that piece is so important. Lessons learned cannot all be good and shiny things. And so if your speakers are just telling you those great, awesome outcomes, make sure you ask the question, well, where did you fall down? Where did something not work for you? Where did you have the challenge? And that's going to be a big piece of what I hope to come out, because the greatest thing to come out of a failure is the learnings to not repeat said failure and the opportunity to share those learnings with others. So hopefully we'll get an opportunity to do that. So track 1 over here, effectively your experts, your best practices, those lessons learned. Now we couple that with track 2, which is going to be over here over the next couple days. And track 2 is 100% populated by case studies. Real companies doing real KM, often by people that don't have the letters K or M in their title. People in communications or IT or on the business side who were presented with a challenge, oftentimes not said go and fix KM, but on the contrary, were asked to fix something or do something for their organization. And so these are the stories about improving search, improving findability, helping people connect, helping knowledge get captured, that again should ideally inspire you all to potentially replicate some of this, that should guide you on what to do or what not to do, but also will give you the realities of it. If you're not hearing from these folks about those sticklers that were throwing up blockers because they didn't want to change, if you're not hearing from these folks about the big mistake you made in making something overly technical or talking too much about how cool it is from a KM perspective, but not about what it's going to do for the business, then they're not saying the right stuff. So again, challenge them to hear those items. But overall, the idea is that throughout these 2 tracks, you should be able to go back and forth. Hit the ones that entice you, that cover the topics that you want, that are from the organizations that you've been following. But also, don't be afraid to sort of poke back and forth. There's not a lot of geography between these 2 rooms. And I promise you that the speakers will not be offended if you pop in and out, as long as you don't slam those heavy doors in the back of the room. So get a sampling, do a bit of a tasting menu to make sure that you're really getting as much out of this as you can. A few more viewpoints. We have very purposefully scheduled a lot of time for breaks. And we've done that for 2 reasons. One is that we know y'all are busy. We know that there are going to be those points where you've got to take that call or you've got to answer that email. And so we want to give you time to do that. But much more importantly, this is what I said earlier. We hope that this is not just a conference that you get stuff out of in these rooms. We hope that you also get stuff out of in that room, that you get the opportunity to meet new people, to follow up with the speakers, to ask them questions, to learn from each other, to connect, to find somebody new to add to your community of practice or your cohort. Adding to that, and extremely important, of course, we've got our happy hour at the end of the day today. Nothing makes you thirstier than learning about knowledge management, so join us at 5:30. We will spend an hour, again, out near the sponsor booths, having a couple drinks, talking with each other. Please also find me during that time. This is my second year chairing. I'm still learning. I want to make sure that this becomes a better and better and stronger event every year that we do it and every year that I'm asked to participate. So if you have any feedback for me on the format of the talks, the types of speakers, anything else, I would love to hear from you. The last thing to note is the Stump the Experts panel tomorrow morning. So at 9, we're going to lead off the day by basically having some full-time KMers up at the front of the room, and you all will be using a digital tool, using your phones, to ask questions, rank those questions, and we'll get the speakers to answer them. And we'll do some informal voting, some show of hands to see which of the panelists best answered the question. So we're gamifying this a little bit. We're going to get these folks to be a little competitive. So think over the course of today about the question that you haven't had answered, or the question that you asked and maybe the speaker pivoted and dodged a little bit because they didn't have that great answer. So we really want those hard questions to come out, and make sure you're back tomorrow morning for that. Now, a couple of those programming elements that I talked about. Two of our speakers today were subject to travel bans from their companies, so they're still talking, but they're going to be giant heads talking as opposed to people here. Minu Mittal at 11 a.m. this morning and Jen Jensen at 4 this afternoon. Both of them are great speakers. Jen spoke last year and was actually our highest rated speaker, so she will be virtual. She was very sad about this and she felt terrible. She just found out night before last. But that said, she will still be here digitally, and hopefully she won't be speaking to an empty room. But the good news is, if everybody decides to go to the other thing, she won't be able to see that, so don't feel badly for her. Tomorrow, same deal, Jack Merklin and Chris Holm, in both of their cases, we're actually filling their slots with other speakers. Joe Hilger, my colleague, will be closing tomorrow, the last slot of the day, by talking about how knowledge management and artificial intelligence fit together. That is a big theme, and he just found out about that, by the way. Hey, Joe, you're speaking tomorrow afternoon. So we're going to be filling that in, and that should be, I think, a nice close to the day, because in many ways, as you're about to hear from me, it is one of the driving forces in this reinvigoration of the knowledge management field right now. So with that, let's talk about what we've got. I did the math on this, and I'm not going to ascribe these years to individuals, lest some of them feel a little dated, but I figured this out. We have a total of nearly 500 years of knowledge management experience speaking over the next 2 days. So lots to learn, lots to experience here. Awesome organizations: USAA, Sodexo, Grant Thornton, RGP, World Bank. These are real global organizations that are struggling and are working to address and are investing in knowledge management in order to meet the needs that are the same things that your customers, your end users are asking for. So I really invite you to, again, both during the speeches, but also during the social time, please reach out to these folks, please engage with them, and make sure that you're getting a lot from them. So, KM Foundations. For those of you that have heard me speak before, a couple of these slides are repeats, but they're important just so we really start this all baseline. I know, and I was gratified to see that we have a lot of new people in the room today, and so I always like to start off with this slide, and I promise it is the only time I will read from a slide. But what I like to do here is say, KM involves people, process, culture, and enabling technologies necessary to capture, manage, share, and find information. This, to me, is a definition of KM that I've been working on for 20 years, that EK has now adopted as our standard, and the reason that I like it so much is that it's clean, but it fully expresses what we're talking about here. Now, what do we care about most in this definition? It's the verbs: capture, manage, share, find. I guarantee you there are people in your organizations that have never heard of knowledge management or think it's just that thing where people go and for some reason take brown bags into a lunchroom and talk for an hour. Those people are expressing challenges and needs. They say, I can't get the right information in the right place. I can't find the right thing. I don't know, I've got this great thing. I don't know how to get it to the right people. They're expressing frustration. They're expressing need. They're expressing these verbs. They need KM, and they might not even know they need KM. And so by talking about knowledge management in terms of what it does, what the outcomes of it are for the business, we're beginning in a common place. And ideally, this is something for the speakers in the room, to the extent that you can apply this to your talks. What are the verbs? What are the outcomes? What has your work allowed your customers, your end users, your colleagues to do? That is how we succeed in talking about KM. But if we want to go deeper with it, this is where I talk about deconstructing knowledge management. The key is that there is a ton here. We're so lucky and also so challenged. We are in a field that can mean a lot of different things to different people, that does include many different concepts, ranging from very non-technical to highly technical. So what we've done in order to fully express this is pull it apart into 5 primary components: people, process, content, culture, and technology. And if you can't tell, I've maybe said those 5 words once or twice before. They roll off the tongue just so beautifully. So let's start with people. When we're talking about people, we're talking about the people that hold the knowledge and the people that need the knowledge, and how that flows throughout the organization. One of the big challenges is to think about that person on their first day. They've just been hired. Somebody gives them a task, and they say, well, how do I do that? And who can guide me in that? And who's done that before? But at the end of the day, this is about the concepts of tacit knowledge, the stuff that we hold up in our head, getting transferred to others who need it, but also that tacit knowledge being transferred into more structured or semi-structured formats such that it can be maintained by the organization. From a process perspective, gosh, everybody loves to talk about processes, but nobody likes following them. So this isn't just about how an organization has documented their KM, documented the way that knowledge is captured and shared and found, documented how semi-structured knowledge becomes fully structured knowledge. It's about how those processes are followed, how they are made easy for an organization to actually make them happen, how they're made transparent or invisible even, such that an end user doesn't have to know the process. They're just built into the tools. They're built into the business in a way that it makes them feel natural, easy, obvious. From a content perspective, and I'll use this word a few times, what we're really talking about here is your organization's stuff. To use a very technical term, every organization has a lot of stuff. That stuff ranges, again, from that tacit knowledge, the expertise of your employees and your partners, to unstructured content, your files, your documents, your PDFs, your PowerPoints, increasingly your Google Docs, to your structured content, your various databases and applications. And that full range of information, how something becomes one from the other, is really what we're talking about when we're talking about content. Now, I can also give you a very scary statistic. Most organizations are managing about 5 times more stuff than they actually should. 4 out of 5 documents tend to be outdated, duplicate, near duplicate, or just plain wrong because they're so old and ugly. And so a lot of this content bucket just falls into getting your arms around having the right 1/5 of your stuff remain where the other 4/5 becomes dispositioned. Next is culture. And we can think about culture from the perspective of people feeling encouraged and being willing to share their knowledge, being not afraid to share an idea, but we can also talk about it from the perspective of leadership support. Does the organization have the right mandate to do KM? Do we have the right people willing to step up and say, I own knowledge management, I have been given this mandate from that C level, this is my group, this is my cause, this is my job. And then lastly, we always talk about technology last, because if it becomes the thing that gets talked about first, then it fails. It is the enabling factor, however, and increasingly, and I'll mention this as one of the themes in a few slides, we are seeing KM and technology intrinsically linked. Increasingly, we take technology, we need it, in order to make KM happen the way that we want it to. And so yes, it's last. Yes, it won't be worth anything unless you've gotten the people, process, content, and culture pieces right. But increasingly, it is part of the KM conversation. Increasingly, we're seeing KM efforts owned by IT or sponsored by IT. And there's both a blessing and a curse in that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. Now, the last basic way that we like to talk about KM, again, goes back to those verbs, those actions. This is what I refer to as our KM action wheel. When we talk about all the things that an organization strives to do around knowledge and information and data, they want to create it in a way that's easy and effective. They want it to be captured and managed in a way that it can be maintained. They want it to be enhanced. They want it to become better over time. They want it to have tags applied so that the right people can find it and discover it. And then they want to be able to traverse that knowledge so that you can connect with one another. That last piece is the one that often gets forgotten in the conversation. This isn't just about finding your stuff. It's also about finding your people, finding the expertise within your organization, locating it, leveraging that to build communities and build more knowledge. So all of this should become a self-feeding beast. This isn't just donut-shaped because I like donuts. It is, in fact, donut-shaped because there's no real beginning and end to this. All of these things should feed on each other. We should increasingly see that one good KM effort feeds other KM efforts. We make it easier to find information. All of a sudden, more people are talking about that topic. They're getting together. They're generating more information. That information is getting captured in different ways, which allows other people to find that new piece of information, and the cycle goes on. Good KM feeds on itself. Small successes turn into bigger successes. Now, where are we going? A lot of you already knew that stuff. So let's move forward and let's talk about the trends that we are seeing that I expect, not just for this year, but really over the next few years. And some of these are the same that I talked about last year with a different spin, but there are a couple new ones as well. The industry is shifting pretty quickly right now. So the number one is this, and I think that we've seen this especially with the shaky market over the last couple weeks. Organizations react quickly to the economy, but it's not just that. Increasingly, organizations have become more savvy. They're not saying we need KM because our competitors are doing KM. That justification no longer flies. They're not saying we need KM because our employees asked for it. Because the reality is most employees aren't savvy enough to ask for KM. The reason to do knowledge management has to be because it is good business. The reason to do good KM is because it will prove out as business value for the organization. That can be employee satisfaction, it can be customer satisfaction. Ideally, it will be hard ROI, dollars and cents, return on investment. We will save money through doing this. And if we can talk about knowledge management in terms of hard ROI, every project will get funded, every project will be sponsored, because why wouldn't it? So we'll talk more about that in a couple slides. Next, and I already alluded to this, is that linkage between knowledge management and artificial intelligence. Now, the hipsters amongst us have been saying, well, we've been talking about that for 20 years, so what's changed? What's changed is that the technology now exists, that this is a practical reality today. Without spending millions upon millions of dollars of custom code, cool things now exist, and some of them are out in the lobby, and I expect that you'll explore them over the next couple days. Knowledge graphs, ontology management tools, machine learning systems, natural language processing. You wire the right technologies together today, and you have enterprise artificial intelligence. AI that can link your data and your information and your people and your products and your financial systems in such a way that you can actually have the view of your business, that increasingly that view can be predictive in nature, And increasingly, that tool can actually give you natural language answers to natural language questions. AI exists today if you've built the right foundations. Related to that, but also somewhat tangential, is number 3. And again, I already mentioned this as well. KM, in many cases, will be a technology conversation. It doesn't have to be. You can still do old school KM. You can do it on paper, you can do it in rooms, you can do it around a table. But even those rooms and tables and paper tends then to get digitized, tends to get communicated via an online system, tends to get shared in some sort of SharePoint-y type of tool. And in addition to that, increasingly the KM conversation is actually about enterprise search. We got a bunch of stuff in different places, nobody can find it. Well, gosh, hasn't there been a technology that's existed for, maybe 3 decades now that could address that? Yes, there is. And we're getting more savvy about linking the search conversation to the KM conversation. And the most advanced organizations are leveraging their KM experts to help design search or help make search work. Show of hands, how many people have ever either uttered the phrase or heard the phrase, "I just want search to work"? Yeah. How about this one? "I just want it to work like Google." Fantastic. Great. Good. Thank you for that requirement. I'll get right on it. But here's where KM becomes essential. When knowledge management experts, you, are centered around the conversation of making search work, you are all of a sudden one of the most important people in your company. That combination of talking about search in the context of knowledge management, amongst other technologies, is one of the key themes to how we ensure everyone outside of this room understands the value of KM at its core and from a business value perspective. Next, we talk about the knowledge ecosystem. This is your stuff. Your stuff is no longer just those files and documents. It's no longer just your data. Your people are one example of your stuff. Your products are another. Effectively, any concept or entity, anything that you have within your company is now something that should be linked, related, found, discovered, built together in such a way that it can be traversed in order to find other stuff, in order to create a richer experience for your end users, for your customers. And so there is a maturity now where we're no longer talking about capturing, managing, finding, sharing just our files, just our documents. We are now talking about it in the context of all of our stuff. And then lastly, and this one has come full circle. This was really hot about a decade ago, and then it sort of just kind of went to the side, and it's back. There is a very real recognition today, and one of my jobs is to make sure that this becomes even more clearly communicated, that you can't do KM through the heroics of somebody sitting in the back of the room. You can't do KM just because it's in your title. You need leadership support, you need a mandate, you need an org, you need a well thought out group of people that have been given the role, that are judged on that role, that have it as part of their employee expectations and goals to do knowledge management. This needs to be spread throughout the business. One person sitting in a dusty closet will not be effective, even in the most collaborative organizations. And so this is the least technical thing up there, but it is where we recommend most organizations begin. If you haven't figured out who owns KM, what their mandate is, and how you set them up for success by your leaders, then you're dead in the water. So let's dig into all of these. First and foremost, the ROI piece. Too frequently, we come to these conferences and we talk about the stuff on the left. We talk about KM outcomes. Oh yeah, we're going to be able to do all this cool stuff with information. Less information is going to walk out the door. There's going to be greater organizational awareness. People are going to be more likely to share stuff. Well, that's awesome. That is exciting for me as somebody who's been doing this for 20 years. But it doesn't tie it to the return on investment, which is why increasingly, both inside this room and outside of this room, we need to talk about the stuff on the right, the business outcomes. This will lead to greater productivity, which will lead to cost savings for your organization. This will lead to customer satisfaction that will lead to higher customer retention, which will lead to more revenue for your organization. This will lead to greater employee satisfaction, which will lead to higher employee retention for your organization, which will lower your costs of hiring and recruiting and reteaching the same things that you've taught before. This will prepare you for the future. This will enable AI in your organization, which will ensure that you have a competitive advantage over your competitors. When we get to talk about the stuff on the right, we are at the center of the conversation. And we can apply numbers, formulas, math to each of those things on the right. Shavana Jagrup from Sodexo is speaking tomorrow? Today? Tomorrow. So one of the ways that Sodexo got their very, very major KM transformation, HR-centric system justified was through months of work around ROI. It is an extremely compelling story that went all the way up to the C-levels of this massive organization, one of the largest employers in the world. And that allowed that project and her work to be at the center of the organization and get that leadership support we talked about. That is how you do KM, by tying it to the finances. Next, AI, the brain with squiggles coming off of it, as everybody recognizes. So foundations for AI are knowledge management elements. When we talk about applying taxonomy, what we're really doing is applying structured to unstructured content and relating different types of content, which will allow a computer to create a construct that will be able to answer questions. You can't just plug a bunch of junk into the big blue machine and have it spit out reasonable information. It requires structure. So we see taxonomy and increasing ontologies being those elements that are providing that structure so that AI will work. Well, content cleanup, you can build the coolest, smartest knowledge artificial intelligence system in the world, but if you're pegging it against the wrong bad information, that 4/5 of stuff you have, all you're doing is expediting the way to deliver the wrong information. And so this very foundational KM piece is a huge feeder for good AI. Similarly, structuring your content through content types. By blocking your content, by breaking it up into smaller chewable chunks, you're immediately creating a format that will make it easier for a human to understand, but you're also laying a foundation for a computer to be able to better understand it and better answer questions. Those little chunks of content at the top of your Google search results are a great example of what I'm talking about here. Content governance, well, hey, clean up your content and then make sure it stays clean. KM leadership, we already talked about, instituting the right elements of knowledge sharing so that any future AI engine will continue to have the right information fed into it, and then that feeds into that knowledge sharing culture and that self-feeding beast. Once we start creating better ways to promote our knowledge, to share our knowledge, to shine a light on those who are sharing their knowledge well, it will incentivize others to do the same. But there's a little bit of the chicken and the egg there. And so we see all of these as those foundational elements. If we get them right now, we are preparing your organization to more effectively do AI next year. And here's a visualization of what we're talking about. So many organizations are still on the left side of the screen. Too many are talking about, oh, well, we'll just loosely self-tag content. We'll just allow anybody to throw any tags in that they want. That is the sort of approach that will wind up with you having absolutely terrible tags and very poor findability within your organization. I worked for one federal agency several years back that were very, very keen on the concepts of folksonomy, and argue as I might, they would not let go of it. They said, we trust our people, we're going to allow anybody to apply any tags, they're smart, smart people. 3 months later, they called me, they said, we were wrong. I came back in, I looked at their tags. Their tags included highly descriptive categories such as the insightful stuff, other, miscellaneous abbreviated as MISC, period, miscellaneous for some reason misspelled as MCIS, MCIS. And my favorite, Joe's stuff, whoever Joe was very keen on tagging his content. Folksonomies don't work. With the proper governance, yes, there's a very small place for it. Talk to me about that if you really, really want to do them. But the reality is, everybody in this room should be looking to the right side of this screen. Build the taxonomies, test them, vet them, get them in place so that your organization will be ready to mature towards ontologies and be ready to build those into knowledge graphs such that you will be able to go to your C-levels and say, I have laid the foundation for that thing that you've put on your strategic roadmap. I have the building blocks of artificial intelligence that I've been working on for the last 3 years. We're ready to go when you are. That is the message that you should be able to deliver. Because at the end of the day, those foundational elements of KM, combined with some of these new cool, sexy tools that we've got outside, are AI. You don't need to build the single big blue box. There are many different tools, many different vendors that have now successfully deployed this stuff. We've got a couple of them out in the hall. We have talks from RGP and Inter-American Development Bank and USAA here that have begun to go down those paths and put these things in practice. IDB has built what they call the brain. It is a tool that you can include on your calendar invites, and when you invite somebody to the calendar invite, it understands who that person is, what the topic of the meeting is, and sends pre-reading information totally automatically curated to the right people that are invited to the meetings. Highly customized. That is predictive knowledge AI. That is in production today. Go back to your organizations and tell them that this can happen today. Next, let's talk about that broader concept of technologies. So don't worry, I'm not going to go through this whole slide, but increasingly we're getting the conversation from an organization that calls us and says, we know we're behind on KM, what's the tool? And the answer is there's not a tool. The reason that I like to put this slide up is that a good KM solution will be a suite of technologies, well orchestrated, well integrated, well designed to work together, to be intuitive to the end user, but with that recognition, with that understanding that there is no one thing that will check all of the KM boxes. So the first key here is, what are your KM problems? Because you don't necessarily need to go out and buy these 10 different products. Some tools do a bunch of these things. For some organizations, you don't have a particular need for a digital asset management system, or you're all located in a single office, in a single room. You don't need an online collaboration tool in the same way that a global organization with tens of thousands of employees would. But this is your starting point. This is the recognition that there's no one product that does KM. Your organization likely already owns a bunch of products that do KM. If you're like most organizations, those tools aren't wired together. They're not particularly well designed. They're not particularly built for your end users. That's where you come in. But more than anything else, it's about choosing the right tools, getting rid of the wrong ones. Don't buy that shiny new thing just because everybody's talking about it. Get the stuff that will meet your purpose. Build it right. So everybody wins the prize for what is that number one tool that everybody has implemented. Wrong. SharePoint, thank you, yes. When you have a product that is super easy to implement, that does a bunch of things, you have likely built it in a way that your users will hate, that they will be able to do all the wrong things in and few of the right things. And so again, it's not just about buying the tool. It's about buying the tool and building it right and supporting it over time. Sustainment and evolution costs a heck of a lot more than implementation. But if you get the implementation right, then everything else will follow. Here's a logical, scary diagram of what the enterprise technology suite might look like for an organization. I'm not going to speak about this. I will speak about it if you grab me in the hall or buy me a drink tonight, because for this logical diagram, that's what it's going to take. Next, let's talk about that enterprise knowledge view. at this point, the knowledge ecosystem. So too many times at these conferences, the conversation deteriorates to what's KM and what's IM and what's document management and what's data management, and the answer is, I don't care, and neither should you. If you're doing your job right, you're operating along a spectrum of knowledge and information and data management. The most effective, most mature organizations look at all of these things as different types of the same thing. The right organization and the right design will allow the end user to traverse their knowledge. Find a piece of information, find 3 more as a result of that, discover one of the authors, talk with that author, get invited to a community of practice, go to that community of practice, see people talking about a database, go to that database, discover from that database a different app. That is the journey that mature KM organizations enable for their users. The most mature allow somebody to do that without even knowing that they're taking different steps through different systems and different types of information. It should be seamless. But at the end of the day, the message here is simple. All knowledge and information exists along a spectrum of responsibility. Good KMers will take ownership and take the broad view because the design that you put in place for a piece of knowledge should be applicable, even in a semi-related way, to other types of knowledge, other types of information, other types of data. Even if you're not implementing integrated systems today, your job is to ensure that they can be integrated in the future. And here's that view of that experience. National Park Service is one of our favorite clients, and we help them implement an enterprise system called their Common Learning Portal that does exactly this. And one of my favorite stories is that as we were going on the roadshow to promote all of this, this guy comes up to me and he says, I thought I was alone, but I'm not. He thought he was the only Falcon tracker employed by the National Park Service. Falcon tracker, by the way, is so much cooler than knowledge management. So if you are thinking about a career change, highly encourage Falcon tracking. So he thought he was the only person that had expertise in this. You tag the Falcons and do all the data around it. Through this system, he was putting information in, he was sharing information. And what he found is that somebody else was finding that information and commenting on it, enhancing it with their own knowledge. And over the course of these experiences, he discovered that there was a second Falcon tracking expert in the National Park Service. Existed in a different park on the other side of the country, and they have now built a community of practice in the tool, and they are building a cohort of other people that are interested in this so that they can share their knowledge because they're both a couple of years from retirement. That's good KM. It started with sharing knowledge. It continued to enhancing knowledge. It continued with 2 people connecting that then translated into the construction of a COP that then had that COP building out into a broader cohort. That's what can be done when good design, good people, and good technology comes together. Now, let's talk about orgs. So, I already prefaced this, but let me say it really, really clearly. And those of you in your organizations that are being asked right now to do more with less, being asked to figure it out, being asked to, boy, we know that we haven't really enforced this, but you're a smart person, you can make it work. Take this quote down. KM will not work without leadership mandate. KM will not work without dedicated staff that have been given the power to succeed. Go back to your organization, tell your C-levels that you need a group, that you need people. They don't necessarily need to be full-time, but they need to have this as a part of their job. Hero KMing does not work. Asking pretty please to a bunch of very, very business people that are motivated by how much they're selling, not how much content they're sharing, does not work. Mandates, job performance, building it into the fiber of the organization is the only way that you will ever truly be able to become a mature knowledge management organization. Now, there are baby steps along the way. You can do 20 cool little things with little pilots and prototypes first, and then use that stuff to go to your leadership and get the support. But sooner or later, if you want to grow up as a KM organization, if you want to not just be the one person doing this, frayed and tired and acting as the human search engine for your organization, you need the mandate. Now, as we look beyond 2020, it goes back to this idea of AI, knowledge artificial intelligence. So right now, a lot of organizations are pretty okay at getting their KM tools to help them answer questions or maybe make recommendations. This is basic search. What we want to get to are these ideas where well-designed enterprise KM systems that are linking knowledge and information and data aren't just giving you the right piece of information. They are, in fact, helping you discover information that you didn't know even existed within the enterprise. But they're going further than that. They are also not waiting for you to ask for that piece of information. They're recognizing enough about who you are, what your mission is, what your job role is, that they can recommend information to you. We're seeing this particularly exciting when it comes to learning content. So learning is another one of those areas where KM and learning are coming together in really exciting ways. What we want to see happen is that somebody doesn't have to go and proactively choose to take the class in the thing. We want to see that class going to the user. We want to see the system recommending the right learning modules to that end user. And I use that phrase, learning modules, very, very carefully. Because increasingly, this isn't you going to a place for 4 days to listen to a teacher teach something. Your retention from that's going to be at best 20 to 30%. When we say learning modules, they're increasingly online, they're increasingly digital, and they're increasingly learning at the point of need. Meaning that you might be in the middle of an activity and you're going to have the opportunity to spend 5 minutes figuring out how to do it better because the tool is recognizing that you need help. That is knowledge AI. That is achievable today. From a sales perspective, let's bring this back to ROI. This is the system having the right content types, the right ontology, the right linkages between your CRM and understanding of your customers, your financial management systems, and your sales systems and your knowledge base in order to recognize what you haven't yet sold to a customer, what their risks and needs are, and then automatically assembling your content to create a deck for that user. That is happening today. And so don't be limited by the I just want Google. Sure, do that first, that's fine. But know that the technology and the concepts, the expert speakers that we have over these couple days can begin to get you ready for that thing, that KAI experience that inevitably is what your users and your executives are going to be asking for if they're not already. Now, my last minute or two, I want to tell you what my goals are. Again, I've kind of broken this down into our 5 categories of KM. We as good KMers should be eating our own food here at the conference. So from a people perspective, make a new friend. Create a connection. Find somebody who has knowledge on a topic where you wish you had more. Get a couple business cards if people still have business cards, or do the cool scanny LinkedIn thing. But whatever it is, find somebody new to learn from or to teach. From a process perspective, we have very purposefully designed some interactive sessions over the next couple days. And even those sessions that are more lecture type of format, these folks should be sharing methodologies. They should be sharing the how-tos. Walk out of these days with a new process, a new concept, a new thing to try within your organization. From a content perspective, steal this content. Take these pictures. Copy these slides. Get the downloads from KMI. Ensure you're getting the videos and get ready to share them throughout your organization. From a culture perspective, have fun. Number one, I hopefully have gathered the sort of informal way that I talk about this stuff. This does not need to be the conference where we are very formally transferring knowledge and sharing that knowledge. As KMers, we are a cohort. Let's have some fun. Let's enjoy each other. Points for the corniest KM jokes from our speakers over the next 2 days. We'll do a judgment of those over the end of the day. And then lastly, from a technology perspective, there is some cool stuff happening. Learn about it. Even if you are not, in your own right, a technology person, like I am not a technology person, ask these technologists to tell you why you should care. Understand from them what the business value is. Ask them how to sell it to a fellow non-technologist in a way that they will find compelling. And with that, I will wish you all a wonderful couple days. I will reiterate my last and first point, which is I want to hear from you. I will be here the full 2 days. Feedback, guidance. How can we make these next 2 days better for you? How can we make next year better for you? But overall, have a wonderful time, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you all.